So I have shared the screen. Is it visible to everyone?
Yes, sir, it's
Yes, sir.
visible.
Yes.
Okay, fine.
Yes,
Thank you.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So this is what we were discussing in the last lecture, that a architect must balance the several competing forces when encoding the instruction. See, the finally we had an instruction. The instruction need to be encoded into certain stream of bits, and there are certain competing forces that not need to be taken into account for when encoding the instruction. So let's look at what are the competing forces. From the a programmer point of view, a programmer want to have many register and many addressing modes. That means it's a ease of programming. From the this is from the programming perspective, right? It's easier for the programmer to write the code if we have many register and many addressing modes. But the problem with the problem with this having many register and many addressing modes, that uh, the number of register and the number of addressing mode will have a significant impact on the size of the instruction. Look at, you had an instruction, you also need an operand. So when you need an operand, let's say it is a 3-bit, you need 3 operands. That means either the register has to be specified multiple times. If you're referring to the memory, then the memory has to, the addressing mode has to be referred multiple times. So many register means many addressing modes, that will going to impact on the size of the instruction, as the number of times the register or the addressing mode need to be repeated can also be, though many times it can be repeated. Now if the instruction itself is a larger size, then the final code or size of the program that will generated will also be the larger. So it has some impact on the size of the program. Then the next is the desired, from this is from the architect point of view, from the desire for to have an instruction encoded into length easy to handle in a pipeline implementation. So look at, in case of a pipeline architecture, if the instructions are of certain fixed length, then it is easier to handle or in the instructions, rather than you are having an instruction of any arbitrary length. So a architect wants instruction to be in multiple bytes rather than any arbitrary length. This is for the ease of the pipelining, and all the modern day processor are all pipeline processor. So you must have instruction of some length rather than some arbitrary length. And all the desktop and server architecture use a fixed length instruction to gain the implementation benefit while sacrificing the average code size. Look at the, you had the two extremes. So let's go back to the two extremes. uh, let's look at, uh, there are two extremes now. One is a fixed length instructions versus the variable length instruction. Let's look at the top figure. In the top figure, we had a architecture with variable instructions. Now, if we had a variable instructions, variable instructions of a variable size, then if you look at any instructions, there are two fields. One is the operation field, which will specify the what operation the instruction is going to do, and there is an operand field. The operand field is the number of operands on which the instruction is going to operate. So the in case of a variable instruction field, variable instructions, then you need to specify the operations and the number of operands that is available, and every address has to be address specifier. There are, if you have n operands, then you need to have a n address specifier and the address of each of these the operand. So the one of the advantage of this having a variable length instructions, that if a if an operand is not required, then you are not going to use the bits allotted bits for that bits in that instruction. So these are you can generate a code of a, in this case you can generate a code of a compact size because no bits is used. if no bits is wasted, so you generate a compact size. Now if you look at on the other extremes, you had a fixed length instructions. In case of a fixed length instructions, the size of the instructions are fixed. Now when you size of the instructions are fixed, you may have a instructions of one operand, or you may have a instruction two operand, or you have a instruction three operand. Now here the number of the operands is also specified by the operation itself. Here you need to specify in the variable the operation as well as the number of operands. Now in this, size of the instructions are they're fixed. The code that is generated for a given program is more in the fixed format than in the variable format. In a variable format, uh, the only those part of the only the number of bits is required. If the instruction will be specified by the number of bits that is required for performing the operation. So no bits is wasted in the case of variable addressing. But here, let's say you need to perform a operation here in only one operand. You need only one operand, then but your instruction has to be a fixed size. Let's say if it's 32 bits, that means every instruction is 32 bits. Then the Intel 806, the x86 processor, they are all variable length instructions. And if we had the RISC, PowerPC, these are all comes under the fixed length instruction. Now in extremes of these two, that means when a architect want a variable instructions, and when an architect need a fixed instruction. Look at all this, the variable instructions and the fixed length instructions are indirectly affecting the size of the code generated for a given program. Now if an architect is more interested in the code size, you want the architect is interested to reduce the size of the code generated for a given program rather than the performance, then we'll pick off the variable encoding. So in case of the problem, if we have the variable instruction set, if the instructions are of variable size, then the pipelining becomes difficult, and you need to know the how many operands are there. First you have to know what is the size of the instruction, then you have to know what is the how many operands are there. So there will be a performance loss in decoding the number of size of the size of the instructions, number of operand in the instructions. So you pay a performance in the case of variable size instructions. So if an architect is interested in the code size, then in the performance, then he will pick up the variable encoding. And if an architect is interested in performance, then in the code size, then we'll pick up the fixed encoding. So variable encoding and fixed encoding, the depends on there is a trade-off between the performance and the size of the code, whether you want a better performance, or you want to generate the late size of the code. In extremes of these two, there is another architect where a hybrid approach is used, and in hybrid approach they had a multiple formats. Look at in case of a fixed format, the format is fixed. It's a 32-bit instruction, that means all the instructions 32 bits, and if it is a 64 instruction, then all instructions are 64 bit. So the format of the instructions are fixed. In case of a hybrid approach, you had a multiple format rather than a single format. You have a multiple format, and this multiple format, and adding one or two field to specify the addressing mode, and one or two field to specify the operand address. Look at in case of a fixed format, the opcode itself contains the addressing mode. If you look at in the fixed format, we are not specifying any addressing mode. The operation field itself will specify the addressing mode. But here, you need to specify the operand, and rest of the information is to specified. Now, if you look at in the hybrid format, in case of a hybrid format, instead of having one format, you had a multiple formats, but all these formats is of three size. All these formats are of fixed size, and the opcode, and you had one or two fields that will specify the addressing mode, and one or two fields to specify the address of the operand.
Excuse
Now,
me, sir.
yes,
So you said the trade-off is between the code size and the performance.
right.
So what is the advantage of having smaller code size versus like performance? Because if we have performance better, then we'll be solving, even if the instruction like number of instructions is more, we will be doing the task in small time, less time. So why would we go for like smaller instruction code size? What is the
Smaller,
advantage? Yeah.
smaller instruction.
No, I mean small, lesser code size
Let's,
because
let's, okay, just wait. Let me come back to the next slide. Probably it will answer to your question. So if it does not answer to your question, then you again ask me the question. Okay. So
Hello,
let's
sir.
look at, yeah,
Hello,
yes, yes,
sir.
yes.
Can you please describe the advantage of variable instruction size with a small example? I couldn't get it.
So let me try to explain in the next slide, right? So if you do not
Okay,
get
sir.
back, then again you ask the question. So
Okay,
let's
sir.
look at the uh, the so let me complete this one. Now let's look at how the instructions are encoded in a variable encoding, and this was the instruction for a Intel processor, Intel x86, and Intel uses a variable encoding. So Intel is uses a register memory architecture, and in case of a register memory architecture, one of the operand will be there in the register, the other operand can be memory. Both the operand can be in the register, one of them can be the register, the other can be memory, but both the operand cannot be there in the memory. Both the operands will be in the memory only in the memory architecture and no other architecture. If it is the register architecture, all the operand has to be there in the register. But Intel uses a register memory architecture, or the 80x86 processors uses a register memory architecture. So one of the operand can be there in the memory location. Now let's look at, this is the add instruction. So this add instruction, this is a 32-bit integer add. So it is performing addition operation on 32 bits, and with two operands. If you are performing add operation, you need a two operand. The opcode in the instruction itself will be 1 byte. You say the opcodes are 1 byte, and let's look at these two part. This is the x86 address specifier, and is a 1 or 2 byte specifying the source or destination address. Now this is, look at, it's a register memory architecture. In case of register memory architecture, one of them is a register, the other operand will be there either in the memory or in the register. So this is my source as well as the destination. It performs the addition operation, and the result is written back into the register called EAX. So it is a 32-bit register. The second one, it's specify the addressing mode and the base register. Now if you look at, this is my second operand. This second operand, it's a uses a displacement addressing. In the case of this, it adds the displacement. This is my displacement, and this is the register. So it adds the displacement with the content of the register, get the address of the memory location, it fetch the content of the memory location and perform the required operation. And EBX for the second operand, and the second operand can also occupy 1 byte. So if the source register, if the both are registered, if this is a register occupy 1 byte, this is a register, it occupies another byte. Now let's look at this, the second part of these instructions. The second part of the instruction, this is my displacement, and displacement is 1000. So displacement is 1000, so it is greater than 2 to the power 8. So the size of this address field, the size of the address field is either 1 byte or it's a 4 byte. It will be 1 byte. If I'm using the registers only, it will be 1 byte. And if your displacement here in this case, it is 2 to the power 8. So 1000 cannot be specified in terms of 8 bits. So the size will be, by default, it will be 4 bit. Either it is 1 byte or a 4 byte. Now, what will be the total size of this instruction? This 1 byte. This is 1 byte. This is 4 byte. So it is 1 opcode, 1 the operand part, first operand, 4 the second operand, so it is totally 6 byte. So now if you look at, if the add instruction both the operands are specified by means of the register, then it will be of 3 bytes. And if you look at the currently the displacement is 1000, so it is need to have specified by means of a 4 bytes. So the instruction size now becomes 6 byte. Now let me try to answer the previous questions now. Now when the RISC architecture has a fixed length instructions. So when the the RISC architecture was designed, it was heavily used for embedded application because it's a fixed format, and if it was a fixed format, the pipelining becomes easier for the architecture point of view. But but using this 32-bit fixed format of RISC for embedded application, it becomes a liability. Now let's look at what is the disadvantage. The advantage of a fixed format, you get a better performance. But what is the disadvantage of it? The code size increases. What is the advantage of a variable format? It is a compact code size. The code size is very less. What is the disadvantage? You pay a penalty in terms of performance. Why you pay a penalty in terms of performance? You do not know what is the size of the instruction. So somewhere you need to specify the size of the instruction. That part has to be extracted. That you have to find the extract and to find out what is the total number of bits in the instruction. You do not know where the operands are present. Then the operand location has to be specified. You do not know how many operands are there. Those information has to be specified. That has to be decoded and information is extracted. So you pay a penalty. So this fixed format, a 32-bit fixed format of RISC, becomes a liability for the embedded application. And in embedded applications, two things which are important. One is the cost. We need to reduce the cost. Second, this code size. Look at the embedded application, the size of the memory available is also less. So you need to generate a smaller code size. One, you need to reduce somehow the cost and reduce also the size of the code, as a result of which a new hybrid architectures they came into the were designed for the RISC. So a hybrid version of RISC came into the picture, and in this hybrid versions we had two different formats. We had a 32-word format, instruction of 32-bit, and the instruction of 16-bit. Look at, it's 32-bit. It's not variable. It's 32-bit, and it is 16-bit. Again, it is not variable. It is 16 bits only. So there are two versions: the 16-bit instruction and 32-bit instructions. The 16-bit instruction is called the narrow instruction, and 32-bit instruction is called wide instruction. So two versions were designed: a wide format instruction and a narrow format instruction. Now if we had a narrow format instructions, so the number of bits is 16 bits, so the number of operations also get reduced. So you had a few operations. Now you look at in a 32-bit instruction using for embedded application, there may be many instructions which are actually is not required in the embedded application. So there is no point of having those instructions in for embedded application. So they have to reduce it to 16-bit, and this 16-bit can accommodate almost all the instructions that required for embedded applications. So you had a few number of operations, then the smaller address and the immediate field, few registers, two address format, rather than the three address format of the classical RISC architecture of 32-bit. So they reduced it to 16-bit, having from 3 address they went to 2 address. Then less number of addressing modes are available, and less the size of the immediate field is also reduced. Then what is and this 16-bit format of RISC is used in the ARM. ARM has a ARM thumb processor, and MIPS a system. So they uses this the 16-bit format. Now and it is observed that using a 16-bit format, the code size is reduced up to 40%. Up to 40% of the look at there earlier it was having a 32-bit instructions, and instead of then a 16-bit instructions for embedded applications, and then they are able to reduce the core size up to 40%, and the instruction cache acts as if it is 25% the larger. So because the size of you're not the size of the instruction cache is not being reduced, but what is reduced is the size of the code generated is reduced, and this gives an illusion that the instruction cache size is increased by means of 25%. Now IBM has also reduced IBM also come with another mechanism to come up with IBM code pack, so for the embedded application. And in IBM code pack, they are not reducing the size of the instruction, but what they did, they compress the instruction set, and since they're compressing the instruction set, then he added up a hardware to decompress the instruction as fetched from the memory onto the instruction cache. So while storing the instruction, they compress the instruction and store it in the memory. And on an instruction, on a cache miss, they fetch the instruction. Since the instruction is a compressed format, and additional hardware is added up to decompress the instruction, and that decompressed instruction is stored in the instruction cache, and size of the instructions are 32 bits. So the compressed code is kept in the main memory or ROM or a hard disk. And now what is the problem with this? The compression, look at, if you are doing a compression and decompression, so you're losing some performance. And it is observed that in the IBM code pack, it loses a 10%. Where the performance is lost? The performance is lost in terms of compressing and decompressing. Here you lose the performance. And if you look at in the RISC, you don't do any compression and decompression. So you lose a 10% performance loss, but they gain a size in the code reduction up to 30 to 40% size in the code reduction. The another advantage of the IBM code pack, that the compiler need not be, look at, you had a 32-bit instructions. So you need to have a compiler for the 32-bit instructions. So your compiler is going to generate a 32-bit instruction. Now, when you are changing your instruction set from 32-bit to 16-bit, then you need to have another compiler for it, for 16-bit instruction. So the compiler, you need to have a different set of compiler now. But in IBM code pack, the compiler need not be changed to handle the different instruction set, and instruction decoding remains as simple, because the code decoding of the earlier it was also 32-bit. The compression, decompression, again the instruction stored in the cache memory, and then 32-bit. So the decoding part is not changed, and the compiler is also not changed. So this was the one of the advantage of IBM code pack. Hope I have able to answer your question. Why do you have a variable instructions and a fixed size instruction?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now let's look at the role of the compiler. So here we are not going to discuss the entire compiler, but let's look at how does a compiler help an architect, and how does a architect can help a compiler writer. And we know that all programs are written in high level language, and you compile it and you generate a code. That code that is generated is is targeted toward the machine in which the instruction is going to generate. So you cannot generate a code for a Intel processor, and sorry, once you generate a code for an Intel processor and try to run in a Motorola processor, that's not possible. So the code that you generated should be targeted to the processor where it is to be executed. So the most instruction executed are the output of the compiler. So compiler generate the code, and whatever the code the compiler generate or the output of the compiler is executed. Therefore, the output of the compiler is therefore the instruction set architecture is a compiler target. So what it does, the compiler generates a code targeting toward a specific machine, and that machine will execute all the instruction in its instruction set. So the target of the compiler is a instruction set architecture of some processor. Now the architect decides what compiler shall express. So look at what is the target. The target of the compiler is basically the instruction set architecture. Now the architect will determine now what the compiler is going to express. The compiler is going to express what the compiler is going to generate as an output. The architect determine what instruction a machine must execute. So if an architect if an architect want a specific instruction to be executed in machine, then it includes that instruction in its own in its instruction set. So the architecture determines what instruction a machine must execute. Then let's discuss only two things. We are not going to discuss all these phases of the compiler, all the optimization technique, but we'll discuss only two important things, that how compiler and architect affect each other. How does a compiler affects the architect, and how does an architect affects the compiler writer? So let's look at the first one, the impact of the compiler technology on architect's decision. The interaction between the compiler and high level language significantly affects how programs use an instruction set architecture. Then naturally these two questions now arises, that so it is a program. Then in your program, look at, you had an instructions. Now the instruction has the addressing modes. Now if you look at the higher level or the high level language level, then you specify the variables. Now what does the variables contain? Variable contains the value of the operand that the specific instruction will operate. So the next questions that to answer is how the variables are allocated and how the variables are addressed. So you look at, we have specified how the operands are addressed. Now we are looking at how it's a higher level we are looking at, then how the variables are addressed and how the variables are allocated. Second is how many registers are needed. This variable actually stored. If you look at in the register memory or a memory, then these variables are the operand and the registers. Then how many registers are needed to allocate variables appropriately? So let's try to answer these two questions. And answering these two questions are not so simple. Now let's look at the areas where a high level language they allocate the data, and the data are stored in three specific areas. One is the stack. Then there is a global data area. This is the global data area. The stack is one certain portion of the memory. Global data area is another portion of the memory where some type of the variables are stored. And third one is the heap. So let's look at what type of data are stored in the heap. Stack, the global data area in the heap. All the local variables are allocated to the heap, allocated to the stack. So the stacks contain all the local variables, and the stacks, we know that the stacks can grow, stacks can shrink on a procedural call and a procedure return. So when you call a procedure, and all the local variables in the procedure need to be stored, and when you return from it, then it's a so local variable stored, so the stack grows, and when you return from it, the stack shrinks. Now, if you stored a variable, now let's call that is an object. The object or address, then if you stored a variable on a stack, then how do you address that variable? That variable address relative to a stack pointer. So we know that stack has a stack pointer, and if you access any variables, then you manipulate with the stack pointer. You store a variable or you retrieve a variable, we manipulate with the stack pointer. So objects are addressed relative to the stack pointer, and all objects are primarily scalar. No arrays are stored on a stack, so it's a scalar, so it's stored as very a single variable, and no arrays are stored in a stack. Stacks are used for activation of records, and they are not used for evaluating the expression. Now let's look at what are the informations or the data that stored in the global area. Allocate statically declared object. All statically declared object, that is all the global variables and all the constants, are stored in the global data area, and many are mostly are arrays or aggregated data structures. And if you look at the heap, the dynamic objects are allocated in the heap. So again, heap is another portion of the memory where all the dynamic objects are stored, and these are objects are accessed by the pointer, and the objects stored in the heap are usually not a scalar object. Now let's look at the register allocations. The register allocations are more effective for stack object, and they're less effective for global variables, and not effective for heap objects. Now it says it's a register allocations, it's a more effective for a stack object. So what type of object are stored in the stack? All the scalar objects are stored on the stack, and they are less effective for the global variables, and not effective for the heap object, because all the dynamic objects are stored in the heap, and they needs a pointer. So no dynamic objects are allocated to the registers. Now there is another problem with the accessing of the variable or allocating the variable register. If a variable is aliased, so a variable is said to be alias, there are multiple ways of referring to the address of the variable. Now if a variable can be accessed by a multiple means, then that variable should not be allocated to a register. For example, this says that this is the suppose I had a variable a, and this is stored, the address of a is stored in the P, and a is directly assigned, some variable is directly assigned to a, and then again through uses P to assign the variable a, then you access a. Now there are multiple ways of accessing the a. So if there are multiple ways of accessing a, then a should not be allocated to a variable. Sorry, a should not be allocated to a register. The aliasing causes a substantial problem because it is difficult to decide what objects a pointer may refer to. So if you're using alias, if an aliasing is done here, those such objects should not be allocated to the register, and the registers are sometimes there is a mechanism for allocation of the register, and it uses a graph coloring algorithm for register allocation. So I'm not going to discuss the register allocations in this class. Next, let's look at how the architect can help a compiler writer. Now the the
Hello,
complexity.
sir.
Yes.
Sir, can you please be a bit more descriptive about the last problem related register allocation? Means, once we assign any address to a pointer, that pointer is always going to point that address. Then why will it create any problem?
There are this because now let's look at uh, a is a variable. Okay, a is a variable. Let's say I have assigned a, compiler has done this one to the register a. So a is a variable, a is a memory location, then the content of the memory location is placed in the register a. Okay, now I had, let's say a is 5, so a was 5, 5 is done. Now, so this was ax was assigned, so what is the value of ax? Ax value is 5. Now 7. So what is the value of a now? Value of a has changed to 7, but what is the value of this eax? That is not going to change. So that creates a problem. So aliasing is always a problem because there are multiple ways of changing, and if I have the compiler has no way of knowing how the value of a can be changed in a multiple ways. So if there is a aliasing, then the variables should not be allocated, and there are certain compilers then they never allocate the variables to a register, and some types of compilers, the moment they look at some aliasing is done or there some pointers are used, they do not allocate to the register. So there are different combinations are there. So there is a problem in the case of aliasing. That is why you do not that is why the if a variable is alias, then it should not be allocated to the register. Next, look at the how does the architect. Now look at writing the compiler is it is a complex problem. No, it's a complex task, and the complexity of the complexity does not comes from translating the certain simple statements like a is assign the value b plus c. So let's look at the compiler is going to translate this. This is a high level language. The code need to be generated. Then translating such type of simple sentence, it does not give rise to a more complex problem. But the complexity of the compiler arises because the programs are very large and global complex in the interaction. The interaction in the programs also very complex, and the structure of the compiler, there are two problems there. One, large problem, programs are very large and they're more complex in their interaction, and structure of the compiler. Look at the compiler has a different phases, and in every phase you do some optimization, and once an optimization is done in a phase, it cannot be reported back. So if you are in the code optimization phase, then you cannot go back to the previous phases. So reverse is not possible. And one is the size of the program. The complexity is due to size of the program and complexity in their interaction. And second is the structure of the compiler, where it said decisions are made one step at a time about a code which the code sequence is based. So you make a decision in one phase, what is the best decision that you can make, and you go back to the next stage. Then after that, going to the next stage, there is no way of reverting back to the previous stage. And most of the compiler writer, they believes in a philosophy that called the make the frequent phase the fast and rare case the correct. Look at what is this philosophy. This philosophy is also for the computer architect. Make the frequent case the faster and rare case correct, and the compiler also believes in this philosophy, make the frequent case faster and rare case the correct. And now and some instruction set architecture properties that helps the compiler writer, and this is used as a guideline for writing the compiler, but they should not be used as an hard and fast rule for writing the compiler. Let's look at some of the guiding principle of some of the properties of instruction set architecture that helps the compiler writer. One is to provide regularity. Now, the moment you talk, when you say about the regularity, there are three primary components of an. Let's take any instruction set. There are three primary components. One is the operation, then data type, then the addressing mode. Then these three primary components of an instruction should be orthogonal. Now, when you say these components to be orthogonal, the two aspects of an architecture is said to be the orthogonal if they are independent. For example, the operation and addressing mode. We had operation. There are three things. One is operation, one is data type, the addressing mode, and all should be orthogonal. And if they are, you say that two aspects are orthogonal if they are independent. Now let's take an example. The operation and addressing mode. The operation and addressing mode are orthogonal if for every operation to which one addressing mode can be applied. So you say you had an operation and one addressing mode can be applied to that operation. Then all addressing modes are applicable. That means if for every operation to which one addressing mode can be applied, then all addressing modes are applicable. That means there should not be a fixed addressing mode for a one operation. If there is all addressing mode can be applied to that operation, then we can say it an orthogonal. Then when it becomes when they becomes orthogonal, they helps in simplifying the code generation across the different passes of the instruction. Now give a counter example to this. Now if you restrict it, suppose you make a restriction that the restriction is if a restriction on what register to use for a given instruction. Suppose you put a restriction now, you are not making any you are not making any orthogonal. In previous case, in the previous example, you had an instruction, you are not restricting any instruction to any addressing mode. So all addressing mode can be used. Now let's take another counter example to this. I had an instruction that uses a specific register. Now this instruction this restriction can result in the compiler finding itself I don't know what is it. Finding itself. Sorry. This restriction can result in the compiler finding itself with a lots of available. Look at the finally I had a instructions. There is a variable and it says certain register can be used only with these instructions. Then the compiler has to find the availability of that instruction. Then what does the compiler do? The compiler may find a lot of available register, but none of the register are right kind for allocation. So that will create a problem in the code generation. But slightly now switch over, there is a quiz now. So that quiz should come around 9:45. So it's already 1 minute past. So go back to the general section. You had a quiz there saying you solve the quiz within 10 minutes. By 9:55 you have to submit it. So quickly switch over to the general section, find a quiz and answer it.